I made this drone video of Fort Pike on Monday, July 1, 2024. The fort is located in the Rigolets in East New Orleans. Fort Pike State Historic Site is a decommissioned 19th century U.S. fort named after Brigadier General Zebulon Pike, who I'll discuss later in the video. It was built following the War of 1812 to guard the Rigolets Pass in Louisiana, a strait from the Gulf of Mexico via Lake Borgne into Lake Pontchartrain, which borders New Orleans. It was located near the community of Petite Coquille, now within the city limits of New Orleans. The fort's ruins were a long-time tourist attraction, but it was damaged by Hurricane Katrina storm surge in 2005 and closed for a period. It also had to be closed following Hurricanes Gustav and Isaac in 2008 and 2012, respectively. Prior to the construction of Fort Pike, a fort had been built in 1793 at Petite Coquille and was the intended destination of Jones's gunboats prior to the Battle of Lake Borgne. General Jackson's engineer, Major Latour, lamented upon the state of the fort in 1814. Post-war, it was decided to improve the coastal defenses with the creation of Fort Pike, commencing in 1819 to replace the fort. It was the first of 3 forts to be constructed in Louisiana under the post-war third system, along with Fort Jackson and Fort Livingston. During the Seminole Wars in Florida through the 1820s, the U.S. temporarily held Seminole Indians here in the fort that had been taken prisoner. They were eventually transported to the Seminole Reservation in Indian Territory, now Oklahoma. The Louisiana Continental Guard took control of the fort in 1861, just weeks before Louisiana joined the Confederacy and the American Civil War began. When Union forces captured New Orleans in 1862, the Confederate forces evacuated Fort Pike. The Union reestablished control of the installation, using it as a base for raids. The fort became a site for training of the United States colored troops, established in 1864. These soldiers in the South included mostly former slaves. The fort was abandoned by the United States Army in 1890. No cannon was ever fired in battle at Fort Pike. It was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1972. Before Hurricane Katrina, the fort's brick and mortar structure was decaying. The 2005 storm surge exacerbated the problems. It temporarily completely submerged the entire fort and destroyed adjacent state park buildings. The site officially reopened on May 2, 2008. However, due to damage caused by Hurricane Gustav in early 2008, the park was closed indefinitely. When I visited in 2024, the park was still closed, but it's my understanding that this is due primarily to a lack of state budget funding. It was closed in 2015 due to state budget cuts. The fort is really incredible. It was really a eye-opener to be able to see the inside of the fort. The interior part there, that's the citadel. That's where the soldiers lived and kind of made a last stance. The outside part is the offensive part where cannons would shoot ships that were coming in to go through the Rigolets. Quite a fortress. Let's talk about Zebulon Pike, who the fort was named after. He is quite an individual. Born in 1779 and died in 1813, he was a brigadier general and explorer for whom Pikes Peak in Colorado is named. As a U.S. Army officer, he led 2 expeditions through the Louisiana Purchase territory, first in 1805 and 1806, to reconnoiter the upper northern reaches of the Mississippi River, and then in 1806 to 1807 to explore the southwest of the fringes of the northern Spanish colonial settlements of New Mexico and Texas. Pike's expeditions coincided with other Jeffersonian expeditions, including the Lewis and Clark expedition and the Red River expedition in 1806. Pike's second expedition crossed the Rocky Mountains into what is now southern Colorado, which led to his capture by the Spanish colonial authorities near Santa Fe. They sent Pike and his men to Chihuahua, present-day Mexico, for interrogation. Later in 1807, Pike and some of his men were escorted by the Spanish through Texas and released near the American territory in Louisiana. In 1810, Pike published an account of his expeditions, a book so popular that it was translated into several languages for publication in Europe. He later achieved the rank of Brigadier General in the American Army and served during the War of 1812 until he was killed during the Battle of York in April of 1813 outside the British colonial capital of Upper Canada. He traveled around quite a lot for that time of history. Seems like he was on an airplane the way he travels, but he was not. He was on foot and horse, and wow. So in the War of 1812, Pike was promoted to captain. In 1811, Pike fought with the 4th Infantry Regiment at the Battle of Tippecanoe. He was promoted to the colonel of the 15th Regiment. Pike's military career also included serving as Deputy Quartermaster General in New Orleans and Inspector General during the War of 1812. Okay, so that gives a clue as why the fort was named after him. Deputy Quartermaster General. Pike commanded the advance guard of the American force, which was defeated primarily because of the poor planning and half-hearted efforts of Henry Dearborn. At the First Battle of Lecole Mills in November 1812, this is when the poor planning was evidenced. Pike was promoted to Brigadier General in March of 1813, along with General Jacob Brown. Pike departed from the newly fortified rural military outpost of Sackett's Harbor on New York shore of Lake Ontario for what became his last military campaign. On this expedition, Pike commanded combat troops in the successful attack on York, now Toronto, April 27, 1813. Pike was killed along with numerous other American troops by flying rocks and other debris when the withdrawing British garrison blew up its ammunition magazine as Pike troops approached Fort York. His body was brought back by ship to Sackett's Harbor, where his remains were buried at the military cemetery. Wow. He sure got around. That's incredible. He was out west. He was here in New Orleans. He was in New York. He was up in Toronto, Canada. For that time in history, that's, to me, seems like an awful lot of traveling. And that's who Fort Pike is named after, Zebulon Pike. At the end of this video, you will see his portrait. The portrait was done by Charles Williams Peale in 1808. His full name was Zebulon Montgomery Pike, born January 5th, 1779 in Lamington, New Jersey. And of course, we know he died April 27th, 1813, age 34 in Toronto. I mean, that's an incredible amount of stuff that he did in 34 years. Very impressive. So now we're flying into the launch point, the parking lot at Fort Pike. And there's the car. And there's Zebulon Montgomery Pike. What an incredible 34-year-old man. Wow.